As it's me, it's Queen Osset Haru, and thank you for joining me for another wonderful edition of Ask an Aquarius. If you haven't already, please hit the red subscribe button and smack the bell. All right, guys, today I have something very special for you. Today I'm going to do my first ever recording of a show that I hope to continue, a project that I hope to continue. I want to call it The Witch Trials. And The Witch Trials is when I, a modern witch, puts movies, books, and other forms of entertainment on trial for authenticity. A lot of things that you see on television and in movies about witches is total fiction. And so many people believe it. I want to point out to you what is real and what is not. And every time I do a different movie or book, I'm going to give it a rating. And I'm going to tell you how accurate the story actually was. Today, we're going to start with one of my favorites. It's called The Craft, and it's from 1996. A lot of you guys probably saw this because it's a great movie with a really good following. But is it authentic? Is it accurate? Or is it total fiction? Now, I'm going to tell you, the main characters in the movie are Sarah, Nancy, Bonnie, and Rochelle. And basically, I'm going to give you a bit of a summary about the story, and then I'm going to talk about the vices, the virtues, and give it a rating. First, the summary. The Craft is a beautiful story. Well, I guess a beautiful story is a strange way to put it. I just really enjoyed it. I'm going to tell you up front, I really definitely enjoyed it. The Craft is all about some high school girls that are learning witchcraft. It doesn't say what form of witchcraft, if it's Wiccan or if it's, some other kind. All we know is that they're practicing witchcraft. Now, some of the symbols that are used look like Wiccan symbols or regular pagan symbols from the European part of the world. That kind of magic. So I'm assuming that's what it is. They don't really call it anything in the movie. So these three young ladies, these high school girls, they got to be in like 11th or 12th grade. They're very interested in witchcraft and they're learning witchcraft. They're doing chants, they're doing spells, they're casting spells, they're using herbs and oils, they're using all kinds of different things. Now, these three girls are brand new. They're just learning, getting books and reading and learning colors and things like that. On the opening scene, you see all three of them sitting around doing chanting. And the fourth member has not arrived yet. They're looking for a fourth girl to be what they're saying their fourth. They want a fourth person who calls the corners. Okay? So basically, the girl comes, of course. You wouldn't have a story if she didn't show up. The young lady shows up. She's new to town. She joins their group. They all start to do magic together. It starts to go very well. Their magic starts to work. They start to cast spells, and they start to get the things that they want out of life. Things are going great. When suddenly, they're not anymore. Basically, what happens is that the new girl realizes that people are getting hurt. Two people even get killed. And she realizes that some of the magic they're doing is not good magic. They're not doing the right thing. So she talks to the other girls. The other girls turn on her. And she goes to tell her boyfriend about it. Her boyfriend, who's under her love spell, tries to rape her. She escapes him, goes back to the girls and tells them what happened. And one of them, who ends up being the main antagonist, Nancy, goes to the party he's at and kills him. So now the main protagonist is like, oh my God, I've got to get out of this. People are dying. And that's the third person that died. And she's like, people are dying. Things are going wrong. I have to leave this coven. I have to leave these girls alone. So she decides not to be a part of them anymore. And they decide to scare her basically into committing suicide. They go to her home. They terrorize her. A fight breaks out. Two of the girls end up leaving, and the main protagonist and the main antagonist have a fist fight. In the end, the main antagonist ends up in the insane asylum because she goes crazy. The main protagonist moves on with her life, and the two other girls lost all their powers. And that's the end of the movie. Really good movie. I liked it a lot. So, now I'm going to tell you, now that you have a little bit of a summary of what happened, and some of you, that was to refresh your memory, because some of you I know have seen this movie. So now I'm going to tell you the vices. The vices of the movie are all of the things that are bullshit, that probably could never happen. And if they did happen, would have taken a lot more practice, a lot more expertise, and a lot more time than these babes had to learn magic. Okay? First vice, light as a feather exercise. In the beginning of the movie, they do an exercise called light as a feather, where one girl lays on the floor and they all put their finger underneath her. And they chant, light as a feather, thin as a board. Light as a feather, thin as a board. And supposedly her body's supposed to get lighter and lighter to the point where they can lift her with their fingers. And they do. And suddenly she's in the air, suspended. Now, I know for a fact that there are some ancients who say that there are ways to do levitation. But these four did not figure out levitation in a couple of days that they were together. Levitation is something that takes people centuries to figure out, and they darn sure didn't figure it out in one semester. So I'm calling that one a big vice. Number 2, they go out to the beach to do a ritual. During the ritual, 2 things happen that I'm calling vices. Number 1, Nancy gets struck by lightning. And according to the movie, when she's struck by lightning, she is possessed with the power of the god Min. One of the gods, or Minowa, or Min something. It was Min something. So now she's, what's the word? Invoking this spirit. And the lightning strikes her. Now, I've never seen lightning strike in a pagan ceremony and somebody not going to die. I've never seen lightning strike, period, first of all. But if it did strike you in the middle of a ceremony, 9 times out of 10, you would be dead or definitely hurt and not just invoked with a spirit. Likewise, right after that happens, Nancy starts walking on water. I have seen pagans do a lot of things, but I've never seen any one of us walk on water. That is something I've only heard about in the Bible. So that was something they took from a whole different work. So those things, nothing happening. Next one, the next vice. The next vice is another levitation. Sarah makes a pencil move with just her finger, and she's making it like spin around. Now, I have heard of people moving things very small distances with their mind. I have heard of that, but not the way she was doing it. She was staring at the pencil and making the pencil spin around in a clockwise circle without the benefit of her hands or anything. So, like I said before, if people can do this, I've never seen it. So I'm definitely calling that one a witch vice. Next one. Let's turn the page over. The next vice was changing hair color. They used a spell to change Sarah's hair color from brown to blonde. Now, you can change your hair color in modern times with dye, but you're not going to change it with witchcraft. So nothing happening. The next one, changing of the traffic light. Nancy is driving the car, and every time she comes to a light, she makes the light change from red to green. Now, mind you, if you ride down a strip long enough, you will be able to time the light. And without magic, you'll know when you can make it, not so much make it go green, or when it's going to turn green is what I should say. So that could happen, but you're not going to be riding down the strip making the lights turn the color that you want them to turn. I've never seen a witch do that. That is something that is totally Hollywood. Levitation. There's another time when there's levitation. Nancy levitates off the ground Twice, as a matter of fact. The first time she levitates off the ground and she pushes this guy out the window with her magical energy. The levitation part is not going to happen, and pushing him out the window is not going to happen. Another time, they're all in Sarah's living room, and 3 of them levitate into the air. Again, I've heard of levitation, but they're not going to figure this out in a couple of days. As a matter of fact, like I said, when I've heard about it, it was sages who were working on it for centuries. Murder with magic. At a certain point, they murder quite a few people with their magic. Now, I'm not going to say you can't murder with magic, because you absolutely can, but not in the way that they did it. The one way that was totally unrealistic was Nancy pushed a guy out the window with her magical energy. She, just got angry, opened up her arms, focused on him, and all this energy came and pushed him out the window. I have seen witches invoke energy many times before, but never enough energy to push someone out of a window, especially not 100 and something pound man out of a window. Not only did she push him out the window, she opened the window with that same energy. Not gonna happen. Murder with magic. That's the one where she pushed him out the window. But also there was 2 other murder scenes with magic. Now these are a little bit more believable, so I'm not going to call these as vices. And one of them, they make a guy get hit by a car, but he's already running in the street, so you can kind of see how it happened. Then another time, Nancy makes her stepfather have a heart attack and die. Again, not likely, but I guess there are ways that could have happened. Fake TV news. At one point, they're at Sarah's house in the living room, and Sarah turns on the television, and with magic, they make a fake news program come on. You cannot do that with magic. You can tape a fake news program and make it, come up on somebody's TV, but there's no way in God's green earth that you're going to say a spell or cast a couple of potions and it's going to make a fake news program come up on the TV. It's not happening. Next one. Making another person hallucinate with magic. You can't make another person hallucinate by casting a spell on them. Not the way that they did it. She was making her see snakes and rats and all kinds of stuff. In order to do that, she would have had to have given her a potion. Now, there are potions that can make a person hallucinate, but the way that she did it was not with the potion. She just focused her mind on her, and all of a sudden she saw rats and snakes and things around her. So, not going to happen. You might be able to cast a spell and make somebody have bad dreams, though, which does happen in the movie, but staring at her until she sees rats, not going to happen. Disappearing spell. And the disappearing spell actually is the last vice. There is a spell that Nancy does at the end of the movie to make, no, not Nancy, Sarah does it at the end of the movie to make herself disappear and hide from Nancy. You cannot do a spell to make yourself disappear. That would be really cool if you could, though, but nothing's happening. Okay? All right. So basically, this movie had 10 vices. And it had 31 virtues. So I'm going to tell you some of the things I liked about the movie. Because at the end of this, like I said before, I'm going to give you a rating. So I want you to understand why I gave it the rating that I did. Number one, they used a lot of stuff in the movie that's real. For example, the ritual they did with the athame. An athame is a knife. And we do use athames for rituals. They use the term as above is below, or as above, so below. A lot of pagans use this. It means whatever happens in heaven happens down on earth. Whatever happens up in the sky or up in the ethers, whatever happens above happens below. It happens here. Whatever happens in the upper temple happens in the lower temple. Very common. Drinking blood. Everybody doesn't do this. I'm not going to say everybody does this, but some covens, some groups do drink each other's blood. One of the things that they did in the beginning, sometimes in an initiation ceremony or something like that, the members of the coven will put a little pinch of their blood into a cup and then pour wine into the cup. And each member will drink from the cup. Now remember, everybody doesn't do this, but I have seen groups that do. Nature responding to the craft. I have been out in nature, out in the woods, many times doing magic, and nature responded. The winds picking up at a weird time, or some kind of animal flying by that was symbolic, or something along those lines. There is something called weather magic, and there are pagans who do weather magic and try to affect the weather. Sometimes they have success, from what I've seen, and sometimes not so much. Stealing hair for a spell. Many times a witch many times will steal something for a spell. Hair, fingernails, a piece of your clothing. Any of those kind of things can be stolen to do a spell on you. That's why whenever I cut my hair, I like to burn it and not leave it out, just in case. It's one of those old things that us witches know somebody can do to us. They talked about good or bad. Is magic dark or light? And one of the things they said in the movie that is true is that magic is not dark or light. Magic is energy. It's like electricity. The dark or the negative or the bad or the good comes from the witch herself or himself. It's in your heart. A good person is going to do magic to do good things. A bad person, like Nancy, will do magic to harm people and maybe even kill them. So magic isn't light or dark. It's really neutral, like electricity. The question is how and who uses it. Next one. Calling corners, elements, and doing rituals outside. These are all accurate. We do call the corners north, south, east, and west. We do call the elements sometimes. We do all those kind of things during a ritual. And many rituals are done outside, sometimes even naked. Sometimes you'll see in a movie witches out dancing naked in a circle. Sometimes that does happen, depending on the coven and what they choose to do. Some people don't like to do magic naked. Naked magic is called skyclad. I love doing magic skyclad because you can feel the energy, but some people don't like doing that. Every time I've done skyclad magic, I've been by myself though. Candles. They had a lot of very accurate candles, especially the shapes of them. Some candles are the shapes of a man or shape of a woman, shape of a skull, shape of a heart. They had a lot of candles, and many of them were accurate. The only thing that was not accurate is that they had too many of them. They had so many candles in every scene where they used candles. And we don't generally use that many candles. I mean, we might use 5, we might use 7. They would have like 30 candles lit in their scenes. It was entirely too many candles, definitely. But the shapes were accurate, the colors were accurate as well. I also saw herbs, I saw sage, I saw oils, I saw chanting, I saw rhyming and spells, and I also saw a almanac for casting spells. These things are all accurate. We use all of these things. You will find all these things in my home, as a matter of fact. Next one, looking for a fourth member. Some of the times a coven wants a certain number of members. 3 members, 4 members, 7 members, 13 members. We usually don't go above 13. So you will sometimes see a coven that's looking for new members or a certain number of members. Psychic connection with the main characters. There often is a psychic connection with your sisters and brothers or just sisters. Some covens are all female, some covens are female and male, and some are just all male. And you often do have a very strong psychic connection with those that you do magic with. Shopping at a witch store. At one point, they go to this pagan shop to get their candles and books and supplies. And many of us have been in these kinds of stores. Modern pagans often buy their stuff from Amazon or eBay or online occult and spiritual shops. But when I was a girl, before the internet was popular, you had to go to the shop. So in 1996, when the craft came out, you still had to go to the shop in most cases. So it looked very similar to the one in the movie. There was candles, usually not that many candles, but it's usually candles. There's usually a person that works there that has on like some kind of a long dress and, long, sleeves. That's one thing I liked about the movie too, was that particular witch and Nancy dressed in stereotypical witch attire, but the other witches did not. Because in paganism, many of us just wear regular clothes, and some of us do wear long things and flowing things and, stuff like that. It just depends on the person. There is no uniform in paganism. You can wear whatever you want. Then focused thought caused crash and heart attack. Now, this is when I talked about murdering people. Focused thought can cause things to happen, such as a crash or something like that. And like I said before, I put these as a vice. And I put them as a vice and as a virtue because it's possible that they can happen, but it's not very likely. But I wanted to make sure that people knew that focused thought can hurt people. You can focus on a person and harm them. That's why I tell people not to gossip and talk about a person like a dog, especially in a group, because that bad energy, we call it a psychic attack. And usually, no, the person doesn't die. That's why I viced it. But it can harm them. That's why I virtued it. Invoking spirits. I have a book called literally Invoking Spirits. So you can invoke a spirit. You can call upon any kind of spirit, an angel or an ancient spirit or whatever the case is, Loki or Osset or whatever, Athena. I've seen people do invoking Aphrodite before. I saw that kind of a ritual before. So you can invoke a spirit. When you invoke a spirit, you call the spirit to you and you ask the spirit to enter your body. This happens in modern paganism. I've seen it in the Yoruba tradition. I've seen it in the Santeria tradition. So a lot of different traditions around the world invoke spirits. This one is very common. All right, let's see. Binding spell. Towards the end of the movie, what is her name? Sarah does a binding spell on Nancy. Binding spells are real. I've done them many, many times. It's basically a spell where you stop someone from harming people with magic. And at the end, she does a binding spell on her, and it doesn't work at first, but then she does another one and it does. Affecting and talking to people in their dreams. Witches do this all the time. And not just modern witches do this. I've seen people who are empathic who are able to do this as well. Sometimes you can affect a person in their dreams. So it just depends on how strong your mental and psychic abilities are. And some witches are very, very good at this. Use of the pentacle and magic. The pentacle or the pentagram is a 5-sided star, and you will see this in the craft and you'll see it a lot. The pentacle is not a symbol of devil worship as some people think it is. This pentacle is representational of earth, air, fire, water, and spirit, the 5 elements. That's why there are 5 pieces to it. Each piece is one of the elements. So it's used as mainly a protection symbol and not as a symbol of evil, as some people do think. Let's see. I think that we're down to our last few. The power drove Nancy crazy. If you watch, Invoking the Spirit drove Nancy crazy. But the Invoking the Spirit only drove Nancy crazy because Nancy had an evil heart. She had a dark heart, an ugly, bitter heart already. She had that from day one. whatever happened to her in her life, it looks like she probably was abused. If you watch The Craft, you'll see her family life. And it looks like she may have been sexually abused or maybe something like that. Because her mom had like some creepy guy who was supposed to be her stepfather. And he's like, doing inappropriate things to her, pulling her robe and stuff like that. So Nancy was more than likely abused. They don't tell us that, but they just show that one scene that really makes you think that something has been going on with this poor child. So she has a bitter, angry heart. So when she invokes the spirit, this neutral energy, it drives her crazy. Because what happens is that she begins to be able to affect things magically. And that energy, it's like ego. It just goes to her head. And it makes her act out, really act out. And at the end of it, she turns totally crazy and they have to put her in an insane asylum. And I have seen some witches who were similar. They didn't end up in an insane asylum, but they were definitely not sane. They were definitely crazed. That energy, if you're not a responsible person, a grounded person, that energy could drive you crazy to different levels. Abuse of magical power. Because the girls abused their magical power, they were stripped of their magic. And in my tradition, we talk about this a lot. The powers that you work with, the energies that you work with, if you abuse the power that they gave you, in a lot of cases, we'll stop dealing with you. For example, I'm a priestess of Mayat. So in my vows, I vow not to hurt anyone, not to hurt them physically, not to hurt them with magic, unless it's in, of course, self-defense. So if I go out tomorrow and start doing damnation spells on people, I more than likely will very quickly lose my abilities. They only work with me as long as I work with the energy that I promised. I promised to help people. I promised to stay away from negativity. That's where my power comes from, my vows. So if I made those vows and don't keep them, at any given time, they could take away my abilities. And let me see. Oh, this was interesting. This has nothing to do with witchcraft, but I wanted to point it out. There's a scene where Nancy gets upset because her spell hasn't worked yet. Everybody else's spells are working, but hers hasn't worked yet. And she gets up and storms off. And they say to Rochelle, the only black girl damn near in the whole movie, they say to Rochelle, what's wrong with her? And Rochelle says, I don't know, like she doesn't want to be white trash or something. And she says it like that. But I thought it was really funny because here we have Rochelle, the black girl, who's being bullied for being black. And she's saying, oh, she just doesn't want to be white anymore. And I told her, like, you're just white. Like, get over it. And it made me laugh so hard because it was like, here this girl is being bullied for her race. And here's the other girl who, for all intents and purposes, to her, seems like she has the race privilege. But she's miserable too. Because Nancy's white, but Nancy is poor white. So she doesn't get the benefit from the other rich white kids. And the other rich white kids don't want to be, associated with her because she's one of the poor white trash. And that's what the problem that Nancy is having. And I thought it was funny that Rochelle, when she answered the question, kind of blew it off. And I was like, but you guys are almost dealing with the same thing, but two different areas. She's dealing with being shunned because she's not rich, classism. And you're being shunned because you're not white, racism. But she flagged off hers like it wasn't even important. And I was like, you're both going through not the same thing, but something very similar. And you would think that she would have been more understanding, or sympathetic, and she wasn't at all. So it made me crack up. The other thing I liked about this movie was the Catholic versus pagan dynamic. These girls go to Catholic school. These Catholic girls and all this Catholic imagery, you see Mother Mary and all this Catholic imagery, the crucifix and all kinds of stuff. And here they are doing witchcraft. It made me laugh because the origins of Catholicism is in paganism. Pagans came first. And the Catholics stole a lot of our rituals, such as Christmas, such as Easter. They stole a lot of our rituals and customs from paganism. So I thought it was really interesting because to me, it all goes full circle. We all borrow from each other. We all borrow from the original source, which was all the way back to ancient Egypt and before, even Nubia. So we all borrow from the original sources and regurgitated and changed the information time and time again. And then you have here the Catholics stealing from the pagans, and now these girls going to Catholic school learning how to do paganism. I just thought it was amazing, and they showed one of the similarities. At one point, all the girls went to mass. And what's burning? Candles. So here we are with all these pagan candles, and then we go to mass and they have all of these Christian candles, basically for the same reason, asking for, in their case, they were asking, I guess, for blessings. And in the pagan case, they're asking for their spells, for their wishes, for their desires. So basically the same kind of vibration, even though these two groups are traditionally seen as being polar opposite. I thought that was a really cool dichotomy to put them in a Catholic school. The rule of three. The rule of three was mentioned in the movie, and that's also a virtue. The rule of three is whenever you cast a spell, and not all of us believe this, but I do. Some of us believe it's 3, some say 7, some say 10. But basically, whenever you cast a spell, you get back what you put out. 3-fold, 7-fold, or maybe 10-fold. So basically it comes back to you more intense than what you put out. So if you put out a spell to harm somebody, then the rule of 3 says you're going to get harmed 3 times worse than what you put out. Now, mind you, this is kind of like on the lines of karma. So not all of us believe this. I do, but not all of us do. So it's one of the things that's very important to remember if you're going to cast a spell, that it might come back to you, and probably will. Light versus dark. One of the most important things in the movie was the light witch versus the dark witch. Nancy being the dark witch and Sarah being the light witch. And the other two being kind of neutral, more of a gray witches if you ask me. And the thing about the light versus dark dichotomy that I thought is very interesting, as I pointed out earlier, is that it's not the magic itself, it's the person. What's inside of the person. So just because a person is doing witchcraft doesn't mean they're doing mean, evil things. They could be doing things to be helpful. They could be doing things to heal. They could be doing things to draw blessings to other people, like I do. I never do magic to hurt people. I do magic to give healing. I do magic to give blessings. I do magic to make people go away. I do magic along those lines, but I never do anything that's going to hurt somebody. So the light versus dark energy was very strong in this movie. So those are all of the virtues. This movie had 31 virtues and 10 vices. I am going to give this movie a B+, as it comes to the authenticity of, what is the word for it, of witchcraft. Is it authentic or not? This movie is very close to being authentic. The 9 vices that I pointed out to you are my only problems with the movie as far as witchcraft is concerned. But this is a really good movie. They used a lot of real symbolism, and they used a lot of things in this movie that modern witches like myself actually use and actually have. So I will give this movie a B+. I like this movie a lot, and it is one that's really well received by pagans and witches alike. So if you haven't seen The Craft, it's definitely one worth checking out. Just make sure that you know that those 9 vices are not necessarily accurate. Okay? All right, guys, it's time for me to get going. So please check out The Craft if you have a chance to, and let me know how you like this video. See you later.